and I am not trying to persuade anybody of anything. um, so a lot of times when I'm done ripping and running around the house, put the kids to bed, I take time to study. Now, when I'm on live, I do pay mind to the chat. I do take time to appreciate anybody who kind of stops by. But I'm just kind of experimenting right now, right? So here we go. I have been thinking a lot about mm, men and women. Um, I've been thinking a lot about our roles as people because they're not the same. Um, hmm, how to put this? I know that this discussion is going to be so far removed from the norm in Western culture because in Western culture, people just kind of do whatever they want, right? And one of the things that people do, especially here in the United States, is, if I identify as this, then I'm that, right? And I like to think of things in layers. I'll kind of talk about something like this. Okay, so I I identify as, okay, how to put it? There's this group of people called the Black Hebrew Israelites, and I stumbled upon them uh, when I realized that I was not a Christian. Ever since I was a kid, I was always, I grew up in the church. I was always in the church. And, it's the typical, you go to Sunday school, they're teaching you a lesson. And this is what really used to get me in Sunday school. You have, I grew up Southern Baptist or whatever. Let me see, I'm sorry, plantain mice. Okay, hey, hi. I try to say hey to everybody. So I'm gonna just talk about what I know. So I went to the Baptist church here in the South. And in the South, the Baptist church, I don't know what it's like today because I haven't been, but me going to the church in the 90s, it was segregated. IDK, what's up? It was segregated. So, and it's really woven within the fabric of the Baptist, what's it called? Denomination. Okay, so the history is very much attached to platinum ice. Okay, thank you. Hello to everybody, by the way. Thanks for asking how I am. I'm doing great. I'm a little nervous. I'm kind of stumbling around. And then, of course, I'm listening out for the kids. It's really good to go live while they're asleep. Oh my God, Sage Lingerfeld. Hey, real quick, I derail from time to time. Lingerfeld. Hey, one of my good friends, her last name was Lingerfeld. So that's why I kind of lit up. So I don't know. Now, don't do that. I started to say, do you know Jessica Lingerfeld? Because, that was my good friend. She's still my good friend. I just don't talk to her as much because we used to have the same job and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, going back to the whole, and this is kind of going to be a challenge for me because it's kind of a touchy subject. And it might get a little racist. I've been trying for it to not to get too raunchy. But anyway, the way that I was raised in the Baptist church was there was a segregation. So there's the Black Baptist church and then there's the White Baptist church. And a lot of my Sunday school teachings had a lot to do with, how to put it, like there's this ideology of like we're trying to take the principles of the Bible and we're trying to somehow marry them with our normal everyday life and beliefs. And I've always been in direct conflict with that. Um, no, why would you? Ugh, the master, whatever. That is such a nasty thing. Anyway, um, so then growing up, I just the fact that the Baptist church, and it was like they did not pull no punches. They were like, this is the Black Baptist church. So I already had hit a wall at that point because I'm sitting here like, and this was things they were teaching us in like Sunday school, and I would just ask questions that I guess most kids wouldn't think about. So here it is, we're in this Black church, and we would have these pictures. You have the picture of Jesus Christ, you have the picture of God, and then you have the picture of like the pastor, and then the assistant pastor, deacon, so and so, whatever. But no matter how many times you walk past these pictures and these people would switch out, some of them would resign. Sometimes we'll get a new pastor, not often, but you get a new assistant pastor. Or if there's going to be a guest speaker, you'll have like a picture of them up or something like that, so you'll know who's coming to the church, yada, yada, yada. But there will be this giant picture of God and Jesus. And my mind just could not understand, why do we have these huge pictures of these bearded white guys, and all of us are Black in here, right? And then on top of that, they would oftentimes mix politics into the teachings. Even when the preacher would preach, he would talk negatively about white people and stuff. And it just always felt like a weird contradiction. Well, anyway, that was that. That's, I guess, my spill. That's an emotional intro, I guess. Um, so I've always had an issue. I was like, how does any of this make sense? So then later on, I used the way that I could rationalize the religion was, okay, for example, a lot of times when the pastor gets up to start a sermon, he would read like one or two lines, and then he'll be like, close your Bibles, the Lord told me. Then he'll start going. And then a lot of times he would keep preaching. And then as he's preaching, he'll be like, now, if you look at the next verse, it says this and it says that. Now, I didn't close my Bible. I didn't close it. So when he would say, close your Bibles, I wouldn't close mine. And there was this mean usher. I can't remember her name, but her face is just burnt and like just branded in my memory. And she used to always target me. Like, I was a kid. Like, let me see. I was probably, I want to say about 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there. The funny thing about me when I was in school was I struggled with reading comprehension. And I know exactly why. Because I read a lot of Old English. So when you read Old English, and then I would study, I was always fascinated. In fact, I have a 1611 King James Bible in here. It's written in Old English. I just loved Old English. It just flowed better. It was just, the vocabulary is just beautiful. It's seductive, in my opinion, compared to our modern speak now. I just really loved it. Like, and then you have like Middle English, where the thou, the thine, the art, the brethren, so on and so forth. And it's not that far removed from Old English, right? So I appreciate it. Okay, when it came to going to school, of course, we're not speaking Old and Middle English, and we're not reading and writing in Old and Middle English. So I think a lot of my reading comprehension issues stemmed from the fact that I was so used to that form of writing. Well, anyway, a lot of times people get stuck on the Middle English speech. right? The thous and the thines and the these and the whatever. Spake. Okay. But I never got hung up on it. So when the preacher would say, "Now close your Bibles," I keep mine open. There was this usher, this mean lady. She used to come by, she'd pop my hand, and she'd be like, "Close it," and I'd be like, I get so irritated with her because I'm like, no. And then what I would do is when the preacher would say, "In the next verse says this, and the next verse says that," I'll start underlining. And the next Sunday when I got to go to Sunday school, or Wednesday when we have to go to Bible study, I would read that and say, why did the pastor say that it said this and it didn't say that? Right? And one day there was a minister that, who pulled me to the side, let everybody else leave Sunday school, let them be dismissed, and she held me behind. So the way the program went is, so you have, when you first come in, everybody gathers and then they do the hey, and then they sing the pretty songs and they greet each other, we hug each other, we say hey to everybody, they sing the pretty songs. I can't stress they sing the pretty songs. I love gospel choirs, absolutely love them. And then after that, of course they're going to pass the offering plate a million times. And then you get up and they'll disperse. So you have adult Sunday school, which stays in this sanctuary, and then you would have young adult Sunday school, which is kind of implied that it was like singles ministry. They'd go to another Sunday school, and then you have the teenagers, and then you would have the children, and then you have the little children, which are like the babies, right? Cool thing. So here I was with the children, and the majority of the children in my Sunday school class were not reading. They certainly were not reading Middle and Old English as I was. So, as you can imagine, I don't know if people know this, but a lot of times when black people are smart, and I'm kind of gonna pick on what's his Master of F N A F, whatever. I don't know why, bro. What you say that? Okay, I want to pick on somebody like that. I love the trolls, by the way. I don't mind trolls at all. I don't care. I don't get phased. Sometimes I like to mess with trolls myself. Um, I'm really thick-skinned. But anyway, something like, bro, say the N-word 10 times. These are the kind of kids I dealt with in Sunday school. These were the kind of kids I dealt with when I was growing up in the hood, to where, now here I am, I'm in my 30s, and I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, no offense to those who may be Christian. I'm not trying to use the Lord's name in vain. Like, I'm starting to realize in my 3 decades that a lot of people don't grow out of where they are. I mean, those kids that used to tell me, "Oh, you talk white." They gonna be 70 years old talking about you talking white. Stupid as a stupid does, right? Well, anyway, this minister, she held me back and let everybody else go. And I was kind of mad because after you disperse from Sunday school, now everybody gets back together, and then they have what's called praise and worship service. Like, it's a whole program. Like, I remember it, and I enjoyed it because it was more of a festive thing. It was more of a concert type deal. It wasn't like, there were a lot of people who really took it to heart and took it seriously, but I couldn't take it seriously because it wasn't by the book. It was like they were just making up things as they go. And then sometimes, like how I mentioned the preacher who would come and guest speak, their church has a different set of beliefs than ours. And so I was like, how is that so? And then, I would always ask these probing questions. So this minister, she held me back and she said, well, you got to understand, people are in different phases of their walk. And since you read and you're taking a book and whatever, and you're studying and all that good stuff, it's a little different for you. So you can't judge your walk based off other people's walk. Okay. Whatever this lady was saying, I wasn't paying attention to it because what I got from it was, oh, okay, eventually people will get to where they're going to read. People like Master of F and F, or however you pronounce his name, they never read. I learned that later. But I was like, okay, maybe I'm just advanced. And then maybe eventually everyone else is going to catch up to me. And hopefully I bump into somebody who's more advanced than me. And then I can try to catch up to them. And I carried that attitude until I think I kind of grew up. Oh, I know what it did. I got triggered. I went to so I had been switching denomination to denomination. I actually switched from Baptist to Catholic for some time. And I wasn't a devout Catholic, but given that I was in an art school and we sung mostly Catholic hymns, and again, I was in love with Old English and I was in love with Latin and things like that. So that was like right up my alley. I just went through this obsession with Greek and Latin because the church will lead you to believe that the Bible is Greek and Latin, right? And I took an advanced English course and they said, oh no, the Bible is Hebrew, like the original. That's a whole nother story, but I get sick and tired of it. What ended up happening was that minister that told me that somebody was going to, eventually people going to catch up to you, you're going to catch up to other people. That's when I realized I was getting strung along. And then that's when I started seeing church for what it was. It's a business, regardless. You just boil it down, it's a business. And if you don't manage it as a business, you're going to go out of business, right? No more church. With all due respect of Christians, but you got to take care of the building. You got the business aspect, whatever. So that kind of shattered what I thought of the institution of religion. That's the first part. The part where I get triggered. Okay, fast forward. At this point, I'm done with Catholic. Because then I learned that the Bible is not Greek, Latin, Roman, it's none of those things. And then I end up bumping into a preacher who was talking to me about Hebrew roots and pictographs. Anyway, he started talking to me about more advanced biblical studies. Wasn't just him, but it was his whole entire church or whatever, the officers, even the youth were studying this. So then I started feeling like, oh man, I belong here. Finally, a group of people. Like now I feel like I need to catch up to them. Well, the disappointment came when there was a scandal in the church, as there always is one. And it involved a child and a youth leader. And a lot of people kind of know where that goes. And the church did not treat that youth leader like the members. They treated the youth leader like somehow he was the victim. And the actual member who was a victim was a type of solicitor. And the church decided to have a discussion about this instead of handling what had happened to this member. They decided to have a religious, not a religious, but they took a special service. They called it was like a special service where instead of us just sitting down listening to the preacher, we would be able to interact with the preacher, and the subject would mainly rest on what had happened and what we think about it, and try to actively. It was like an interactive. It was like a Bible study. And instead of having like the little groups that breaks up and everything, it was just everybody all sitting here talking about it. And obviously, and I'm treading very, very lightly in talking about this because again, it was triggering for me. Um, that's when I realized that No, this is not about you're thinking on this level and eventually everybody. It just became so apparent to me that people are people, you know. So, and these people were just being people. So there was nothing like holy or divine or sacred about them or even about me for that matter. And that's when I started going, you know what? I'm cool. I'm real cool on this. So anyway, now here I am floating, studying to myself. I discovered a Black Hebrew Israelite group, and I was cool. I didn't first meet the guys on the street corner that be screaming and racist. I didn't meet them. I mean, I've seen them, but I'm like, yo, those dudes, they are having withdrawals. Whatever substance they're on, either it's laced or they're like suffering. They need to get more of it. And I guess it was a lot of the women with head coverings that were in my inbox on Facebook. Facebook is very toxic, by the way, my experience. Got caught up with that group a little bit, and it got real weird real fast because these guys that don't have one job are always talking about how they're supposed to have more than one woman to keep Israel going. And I just keep thinking to myself, like, where, like, how did it get to this? Well, anyway, that's just my, I guess, preamble to everything because I've been kind of studying, right? And I'm fascinated. I'm really fascinated. And I'm gonna be paraphrasing. I'm not gonna sit here and Bible thump you guys. I'm not a preacher. I'm not gonna even try to pose as one. But I keep thinking about this whole woman and man relationship, right? So, and I'm gonna take notes to keep up with my thoughts. So you got 7 days of creation, right? And I'm gonna focus on the sixth day. Because that's the day of man. So, to start out, God, I probably should have taken notes ahead of time and done it in order. But if you start from like the beginning, right? So for Genesis, for the sake of conversation, am I gonna do that? No, I'm not. You got Yah and you got Earth. So I'm gonna try to pull this off as best as I can. Okay. Earth is chaotic. Yah speaks order. And then days 1 through, I want to say 5. And please, please, this is off the top of the dome. So if I make any mistakes here, it's just because I'm trying to get to a larger point. So days 1 through 5, like you got the animals, you got the cosmos, you got everything. And then on the sixth day, you got man. And then on the seventh day, you got rest. Now, I just realized while I was talking about this. I have to study more of my chronology because now that brings me to a first thought, which is, did woman come? Woman come. Woman, was she created on the 8th day? Now that kind of puts a hole in everything that I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to have to go back and study. But the reason why I'm thinking about this so deep is because the seventh day, everything was complete. So now I have to come back. So what is woman in all this? Because the way that I remember it, Yah gave us the Sabbath for the seventh day. Man had named everything and blah, blah, blah. Dang. I'm gonna have to go back. I ain't gonna want to guess. But this is the thing I want to focus on. This might be a chronology issue too, so I'll appreciate anybody if y'all leave comments or anything like that. If this subject entices you as much as it entices me, it would be really, really good to hear from other people that are thinking about this, because this has been on my mind for a while. And I'm not trying to get too preachy. I'm just trying to look at this from an analytical stance, right? So let's say man comes from Yah speaking into the earth. This is what I got so far. Oh, that makes sense there. Cool. Man should not be alone. And then God, woman. Now, my writing looks like Dr. Scratch. But this is where it gets interesting for me. So, you have Yah who's perfect. You have the world that's in chaos. You take Yah who's perfect, speaks into the earth, forms man, breathe into his nostrils, right? So, man is made of dust. Man is made, from the world. Yah breathe into his nostrils. So, it's so that man will be connected to earth, right? And have the breath of life in him from Yah, right? Cool. Now, but there's this, okay, so ha'aretz, right? Earth, which is like broken, I think, in Hebrew, right? And I'm just running through this because I've been thinking about this for a minute. But you got this broken thing that Yah speaks into and forms man out of it. And Yah has his breath in the nostrils of this man who was formed out of the broken earth, right? And then man can't be alone, or should not be alone, or whatever. And so Yah takes the rib and form woman. Now, I know that people say it was like 50% of man or whatever. And this is just a quick rundown, because eventually it's going to be like somewhat of like a talking point, right? So now you got man who was formed out of something broken, breathed into the breath of life, and then he had a form of being broken himself or not being complete himself. And so now you have the woman that's formed from his rib, and I'm just talking just basically, I'm not getting too deep into it. They call her Eve, but her original name is Chua, which means life. So let's just run with this whole idea of a life, right? It makes me wonder, like, what life? Because isn't it crazy? It's like you have Yah giving Adam life, and then, the rib does protect the lungs, which Yah breathed into Adam's nostrils, and you need your lungs to breathe. So that's that. But let's just go When I say Chua, I'm referring to Eve. Most people know her as Eve, but originally her name meant life, right? Now, a funny thing happened with Chua. These are my notes, just in case. I don't even think they make any sense. I don't even think that it's truly legible, but just in case. Um, Chua approached by serpent, and she has a conversation with him. She eats the fruit. She's pretty much, she likes fruit, whatever. Take it to Adam, give it to him. I think their eyes were open after she gave the fruit to Adam. Still need to go and study. But to Adam, so I don't lose my place here. This is what I do in the King of Sweet too, by the way. I be up studying. Usually I have my book out, but I didn't want to come off like churchy to you guys. I know, because I really wanted to be more of a, if people were available, more of a interactive discussion, or even to kind of hear what other people thought. I have to find a way to engage people into more thought-provoking things, and I know that YouTube is like entertainment for a lot of people, so nobody wants to think that's not fun for people. But this was just on my mind, right? So this is what I've been thinking lately. Adam is now, he has knowledge of good and evil. Sorry if my notes are terrible, but that's just so you can know what I'm doing. Now, there comes this discussion of free will versus choice, right? So, I'm assuming he always did have free will. Or now the question is, this is kind of a philosophy course, but was there any need for free will when everything was perfect? Because when you think of the idea of freedom, there has to be the opposite, which is some form of bondage. There was none, right? If we're going by like biblical, right? Like you wouldn't have to think about death if there was no death. There would be no time stamp on anything if everything was always infinite, right? So this is something that I've just been really meditating on. I really need to crack open the book. I really need to study, but now Adam has the knowledge of good and evil. And he runs away from y'all, whatever, get the curse on him, all that good stuff. Chua gets the curse, serpent gets the curse, be on his belly all of his days, eating the dust, whatever. Man turns into dust, which is like, which makes me think like, man come from dust, and to dust he shall return, and then the serpent, he eats the dust. So he's on his belly and he's consuming what man returns to. So man is only wallowing in dust indefinitely when he dies. That's probably why it's the second death. I know, this is getting kind of weird. I hope it's not getting weird, but this is just what I've been thinking about a lot. Like, this is what I do need to really, really study it. Because this is what I'm thinking about. There's this thing with like choice. So now we know right from wrong, but we can choose to do wrong, right? So now Adam can choose to do the wrong thing. Just like so if you look at days 1 through 5, the land and the sea, they have a command. The stars and the moon and the sun, they have a command. The creeping things on the earth, the beasts of the field, they have commands. I hope I didn't get this chronology wrong, but when Lucifer was cast out of heaven, he came down here. Can't remember where that was, and I need to go study, and there was chaos down here. He troubled whatever was down here, and that's when Yah came down here and gave order, structure, whatever, because that's not what was here, right? So Adam was given that order, the structure, whatever. And then Chawah was given to Adam, who they call Eve. And it's like the serpent himself, why did he listen to the devil, right? It's like, and I'm thinking about it, yeah, that's kind of a religious deep dive talking point, but when you talk about like the beasts of the field, and I'm kind of gonna jump because I'm thinking of the beast being a creation, right? Yah created the beast of the field, serpent being the most subtle of the beast of the field, whatever. So I'm thinking, now I'm about to jump. Angels, right? They were placed in the heavens. You got the firmament. You got all that. You got where we are. So the angels are where they are. They were supposed to function properly for what they were until, of course, you have Lucifer, and then he gets thrown out. He was dysfunctional, so he was thrown out of Shamayim, what they call heaven. And he come down here. He's the prince of this world. Yah's made him the prince of this world. So maybe that's why. Because I really think about this a lot. And I'm actually reading the Bible like step by step. Because, I try to do it the Christian way. I try to go to church. And now church is getting to be more and more of a nightclub. And I'm like, listen, I don't got time. And then with me having a family of my own, when it comes to trying to do things the right way, I can't be jumping from minister so-and-so and doing such and such. It is crazy. Hopefully you find a fellowship. So far I have like a Moray that I listen to online, but even that kind of gets a little stuffy because you log in, but you're not really interacting with people, not for real. And there was a ministry down in Charlotte, but it was them screaming people, and I don't do that. That's crazy to me. It smelled like weed in there too. There's a bunch of potheads in there, and I ain't want no brokey culture dust on me. But anyway. The serpent, right? He took a message to Chawah. Chawah consumed fruit. Which leads me to this thing too. It's one thing to hear something that you know ain't right, but it's another to consume it. And if you're around something that ain't right long enough, eventually it's going to be normalized and you're going to get desensitized to it. And before you know it, you'll be doing the same thing. That's what I got from that. I'm not saying that's what literally happened because I do believe in scripture for what it's written, but it's layers of it. There's so many lessons to pull from it when you read it. But yeah, I was talking about the whole how the angels were created. Much like the beasts down here were created, the beasts were just like how the angels were made for the heavens, the beasts of the field were made for the earth, the fish of the sea were made for the sea, the fowl of the air was made for the air, right? But when there came the knowledge of good and evil, and to keep us from the tree of life, Adam and Choi were thrown out of Eden, right? And now we have to work to get our right back to the tree of life, right? And I'm just quick, just because I've been processing this for a minute. And now the kids are asleep, like I'm having a field day. And I'm gonna start reading and stuff like that, but I just be thinking about it. I was talking to my husband about it. I was like, man, and I was just talking about it, and it's still as opaque as it was when I first started talking about it. It's still not clear, right? Anyway, now out of Eden, and we're out here with the rest of the world. These are my notes so far. Most likely, they probably don't make any sense, but just so you can know, try to keep up with my thought. Now we're out of Eden. Now we're around all the other nations, and all these other things. Now you got some people that believe that Adam and Eve were the only ones, and some people will even go as far as to say that Eve was a big old, and she. I don't believe that. There's the book of Jubilee that talked about all the nations, which I need to read that too. I haven't read the book of Jubilee in a very long time because, much like the book of Daniel, if you just jump to that book, you might drown. Because it's so much, so many things you need to know before you get over there, right? But this is my belief. I believe there were nations that were already here. I believe Adam was supposed to give guidance to all the nations around the world who were already here. That's what he was tasked with. But then I believe when his eyes were open, he became corrupted. And so, yes, I'm also one of those people that are, what do they call it, Messianic? Messianic? Yeah, it sounds like Freemason, doesn't it? But I do believe in the Messiah or whatever. I do believe in the bloodline, from Seth down to Noah, down to Abraham, down to Isaac, down to Jacob, Yaakov, who is Israel, down to Judah, Benjamin, down to Miriam, or who they call Mary, the virgin birth. I do believe in that. I believe in the Messiah being a descendant of Judah. Judah, who is a descendant of Shem, who's a descendant of Eber. Where you get this whole Hebrew descendant of Eber. It's Eber. So I believe in all of that, right? So now I like the way that my mind, the mechanics of it, the way that I think about it is like, now that Adam is corrupted, there had to be a Messiah to redeem man. And so that's when you get quote unquote New Testament, all that good stuff. But going back to the beginning, Bereshit, it's like thinking about Chua, right? Who they call Eve. It makes sense that she's called life now because men have to deal with women. Whether a man wants to be married to one, wants to just play around with one, or want to be one, or ends up having a daughter himself, he has to deal with women, right? And that's life. Um, so now it makes sense that, she's called life, right? Speaking of, I think my daughter's up. I'm gonna grab her real quick. Okay, I had to go get my baby. So, anyway, so now you have going back to this whole woman being life thing, right? So now it makes sense why this whole gender war stuff is so intense. When you think of the woman and how she was beguiled by the serpent, it makes sense that even to this very day, women are kind of, what's the word? Aggravating men? It kind of makes sense, right? Because originally she was called life. That's why, man, if you got a woman in your life, she either make your life good or bad. It's just, depending on what kind of woman you're dealing with, right? So I wanted to kind of go back to this whole the creation thing. So, and I'm processing it. It's a lot to think about. I've been thinking about this for a long time. And I still haven't quite got a grasp on it, and I'm hoping that somebody will just kind of, you know, help push it along. But once Adam woke up to know the knowledge of good and evil, now he can choose to not behave as he was intended to behave. So, and it makes me think of all the different beasts of the field and, fowls of the air, all that good stuff. And it's like, okay, there was a time when man was just man. And then man said, this is woman. So it was like he was fulfilling his role in defining who she was because that's the place where Yah put man, was to create order, structure, things like that. So then woman stepped outside of that and was talking to the serpent, right? Okay, so we got that part. The serpent went out of order someplace, some way, which that's what makes me think too about, like I said, Lucifer being like the prince of this world or whatever. There's a scripture I can't quite recall off the top of my head, but man was supposed to have dominion. Man does have dominion over all the life forms according, and I'm going strictly according to scripture, right? Mm, including the woman. Yeah, so, dang, now I gotta ask, was the first violation woman talking to the serpent? Because that's what the church was teaching all day long. Or was it man, how the scripture would put it, as hearkening unto his wife? Because just think about it. If man was given dominion, right? Then why did he listen to his wife? Hmm. And now we live in a world where women feel like they gotta be equal, and some of them even feel like they're superior over men, and men better listen to them. Hmm. But now I'm thinking, I'm like, wow, man did. He had dominion. But you know what? Now I'm thinking to myself, did man get it wrong? Because his wife is his equal. So it was like, ooh. So it's like he listened to the other half of who he was. Now I done. I open another box with that one. Mm. Saying it out loud, I open another box. Okay. Hmm. So now my question is, hmm, is man in violation for listening to his wife at that point? And just thinking about how man, it was shown that he should not be alone, right? And he was sad or whatever. And Yah allowed him, gave him Chua, gave him a wife, gave him the woman, and he said this was his wife. He made her his wife. So let me not, because she wasn't just his wife. She was presented to him. Hence, that's the first marriage. So, hmm, did she forsake her vow? Thinking about it. Well, anyway, didn't want to jump into that rabbit hole because I'm already thinking a lot too, just about the whole thing. So, like, because I'm sitting here thinking about like the beast of the field, like the serpent, right? Okay, now he's on his belly and he's thus all the days of his life. Okay, got it. Hmm. Man's eyes are open. Now man has a choice. Man knows what he's supposed to do. But man can choose to do whatever he wants to do. He does not have to choose what he's supposed to do. And you know what I'm starting to realize a lot about men who are out of order? There's always a woman involved. Somewhere. And a lot of times the woman is running things, whether it be his mom, his girlfriend, his wife, even his own daughter, some cases. And it makes sense. Um, hmm. And then this is what I always think about too. Like when women are out of order, I always think about the fact that our eyes were open first. Were they? I have to look that up. But we've been talking to the serpent longer. And you know what? I don't think Adam ever spoke to the serpent. Now I think about it. I don't think he ever spoke to the serpent. I think it was all Chua, and Chua relayed the message and had the conversation. Like, she bore what the serpent told her, right? So, hmm, I think about this a lot. It's a lot for me to process. It's a lot for me to process. So now the formula is to create corruption. It was like it had to be the serpent to the woman to man. But now that man has a choice, there's no need for the serpent anymore because now man can choose. And when man makes a choice, curse of the woman to serve her husband, things like that, she suffers, children suffers automatically. And there had to be a curse. There had to be a structure because death is the final thing. So to ensure that there is an order for life, for a good life, we could be able to avoid like the second death, right? But it just keeps making me think. It's like since man now has a choice, you know what I think? I think women don't have a choice. I think women still don't have a choice. Because again, the curse was part of that curse was for that woman to serve her husband. And I think this is an important point to lean on too because I understand why people were hurrying up, jumping up to get married back in the day. So people believed in this. And as a woman who's not married, it's like, who are you serving? Like, you belong to no one. And if you don't belong to no one, you belong to the streets. But I don't know. Because, see, at least when you have a husband, the whole covenant just kind of comes together. And this is what I mean. Like, the woman has to serve her husband. So it's like, it's almost like the devil if that makes any sense. And if a woman doesn't have a husband, who is she serving? But anyway, I keep getting question after question. But hopefully, if anybody sees this, maybe somebody can help me with these ideas because I don't know. I might do a part two. I don't know. It's a lot to think about, but it's late, and I gotta put my baby back down. So I appreciate everybody who tuned in, and y'all have a good night and catch you on the next live.